walked through the long hallway of the Sterling mansion with her head down and her eyes fixed on the marble floor. She carried a bucket of cleaning supplies in one hand and a mop in the other. Her footsteps were soft and quiet, almost like she was trying to disappear into the walls. She had worked in this grand house for 3 years now. 3 long years of cleaning windows, scrubbing floors, dusting furniture, and making beds. In all that time, she had barely spoken more than a few words to anyone. The other maids called her the ghost behind her back. They said she moved through the rooms like a shadow, never making noise, never joining their conversations during lunch breaks. Was 24 years old, but she looked younger. She was small and thin, with dark hair that she always kept tied back in a simple bun. Her eyes were large and brown, but there was something sad in them, something broken, the kind of sadness that does not go away with time. The head housekeeper, Mrs., had hired 3 years ago despite her strange behavior during the interview, had not made eye contact even once. She had answered every question with just 1 or 2 words, but Mrs. had seen something in the young woman. Perhaps it was the desperation in her trembling hands. Perhaps it was the way she had flinched when a door slammed nearby. Whatever the reason, Mrs. had given her the job. Was grateful for that kindness. She worked harder than anyone else in the mansion. She never complained. She never asked for time off. She simply worked and worked, as if staying busy was the only thing keeping her alive. And in many ways it was. The Sterling mansion was one of the largest private homes in the state. It had 47 rooms, a swimming pool, tennis courts, and gardens that stretched for acres. The owner was Sterling, a billionaire CEO who ran one of the biggest technology companies in the country. Had seen him only a handful of times in 3 years. He was always surrounded by assistants and bodyguards, always talking on the phone, always rushing somewhere important. He never noticed her. Nobody ever noticed her, and that was exactly how wanted it. Because was hiding, not from the police or from any person. She was hiding from her own memories, from the nightmares that visited her every single night, from the fire that had taken everything from her 7 years ago. She was 17 when it happened, a normal Tuesday evening in their small apartment. Her mother was cooking dinner in the kitchen, was in her bedroom practicing the wooden flute that her mother had given her for her 15th birthday. The flute was old and simple, made by his grandfather many years ago, but when played it, the sound was beautiful. Her mother had taught her a special melody, had composed it herself when she was young. She called it Safe Harbor because she said the tune made her feel like she was sailing into a peaceful port after a long storm. Whenever felt scared or sad, her mother would say, "Play Safe Harbor, my love. Let the music carry your troubles away." That Tuesday evening was playing Safe Harbor when she smelled the smoke. At first she thought her mother had burned something on the stove, but then she heard her mother screaming her name, ran out of her bedroom and saw flames everywhere. The kitchen was on fire. The curtains were burning. Black smoke filled the apartment so thick that could not see. Her mother grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the front door, but the fire was spreading too fast. The ceiling was collapsing. Remembered the heat on her skin, so hot it felt like her flesh was melting. She remembered her mother pushing her through a window onto the fire escape. "Go," her mother had screamed. "Go, I am right behind you." But her mother was not right behind her. Climbed down the fire escape, her lungs burning from the smoke. She reached the ground and turned around to wait for her mother. She waited and waited. Fire trucks arrived. Firefighters ran into the building. Neighbors gathered on the street, crying and shouting. Her mother never came out. They found his body the next morning in the hallway. She had gone back to get something. Later, the firefighters told that her mother had been carrying a small box. Inside the box was the wooden flute, had gone back into the flames to save his flute. She had died for a piece of wood and some memories. Spent 2 years in a hospital after that, not because of physical injuries but because her mind had broken. She did not speak for 8 months. She did not eat unless someone forced her. She had nightmares so terrible that she would wake up screaming, clawing at her own skin, trying to put out flames that were not there. The doctors called it severe trauma. They gave her medications and therapy. Slowly, very slowly, learned to function again. She learned to eat. She learned to walk. She learned to say a few words here and there. But she never learned to forgive herself. Because deep in her heart believed that she had killed her mother. If she had not been playing that stupid flute, her mother would not have gone back for it. Her mother would be alive. Her mother would be cooking dinner somewhere, humming songs, living her life. Instead was dead, and was alive, and that did not seem fair. After leaving the hospital, drifted from job to job. She worked in factories, in restaurants, in cleaning services. She never stayed anywhere for long. She did not make friends. She did not talk to people. She simply existed, like a ghost walking through a world that no longer felt real. Then she found the Sterling mansion, and something about the huge, quiet house felt right. There were so many rooms that could disappear into, so many hallways where she could walk alone, so many dark corners where she could hide when the memories became too much. And there was the garden. The Sterling estate had beautiful gardens with flowers and fountains and stone pathways. At the far end of the garden there was an old wooden shed. It had not been used in years. Gardening tools sat inside, covered in dust and cobwebs. Nobody ever went there. Discovered the shed one night when she could not sleep. The nightmares had been especially bad that week. She had dreamed of her mother burning, screaming her name, reaching out with hands made of fire. Had woken up gasping for air, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would explode. She needed to escape. She needed to breathe. So she slipped out of the servants' quarters and walked through the dark gardens until she found the shed. Inside, surrounded by old tools and forgotten things, did something she had not done in 7 years. She took out her mother's flute and played Safe Harbor. The melody floated through the air, soft and gentle, closed her eyes and let the music carry her away. For a few minutes she was not a broken woman hiding in a shed. She was a little girl again, sitting in her mother's lap, learning the notes one by one. She could almost feel her mother's arms around her. She could almost hear her mother's voice saying, "That's beautiful, my love. You play it perfectly." When the song ended, was crying, but they were not entirely sad tears. For the first time in 7 years, she felt a tiny bit of peace. From that night on, the shed became her secret place. Every few nights when the nightmares got too bad, would sneak out and play her mother's melody. She never played during the day. She never played where anyone could hear. The music was private. The music was sacred. The music was the only thing that kept her from falling apart completely. The other servants noticed that seemed calmer lately. Mrs. commented that the girl was doing excellent work. Even some of the other maids tried to talk to her, though still only answered in short sentences. Nobody knew her secret. Nobody knew about the flute or the shed or the melody that saved her life night after night. And nobody knew that in this very mansion there was another person who was also dying inside. Another person who could not sleep. Another person who was haunted by sounds and memories that would not let him rest. His name was Sterling, and he was running out of time. But did not know this. She had never really looked at the CEO of Sterling Industries. She had never noticed the dark circles under his eyes or the way his hands shook when he thought nobody was watching. She had never seen him wandering the hallways at 3 in the morning, like a man searching for something he could not name. She was too busy fighting her own battles, too busy surviving her own pain. She had no idea that her mother's melody, the same tune that kept her alive, was about to save someone else. Some people call it fate. Some people call it coincidence. But whatever name you give it, something was about to happen in the Sterling mansion, something that would change 2 broken lives forever. And it all started with a song played in the darkness by a shy maid who never expected anyone to hear. Sterling sat in his office on the top floor of Sterling Tower, staring at the wall. His computer screen glowed with unread emails. His phone buzzed with messages he did not answer. On his desk sat a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He was 34 years old, and he looked like a man of 50. His face was thin and pale. His eyes, once bright and sharp, were now dull and surrounded by dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. His expensive suit hung loose on his body because he had lost 20 pounds in the last 8 months. His hands trembled slightly whenever he tried to hold something. Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Industries, one of the most successful technology companies in the world. He had started the company with his best friend Daniel when they were both 22 years old. Two young men with big dreams and a small apartment filled with computers. They had worked 18-hour days. They had eaten cheap noodles for dinner. They had believed they could change the world. And they had. Sterling Industries was now worth billions of dollars. They made software that ran hospitals, banks, and airports. They employed thousands of people, and Daniel had appeared on the covers of business magazines. They had shaken hands with presidents and prime ministers. But all of that felt like a distant dream now, because Daniel was dead, and was dying too, just more slowly. 8 months ago, and Daniel had taken a helicopter to visit a new office building in the mountains. It was supposed to be a quick trip. 2 hours there, a few meetings, 2 hours back. Daniel had joked about being scared of helicopters, had laughed and called him a coward. He wished he had never made that joke. The crash happened so fast they did not understand what was happening at first. One moment they were flying smoothly. The next moment, alarms were screaming and the helicopter was spinning. Saw the pilot fighting with the controls. He saw Daniel's face, white with terror. He felt his stomach rise into his throat as they fell from the sky. Then everything went black. When woke up, he was trapped in the wreckage. Metal pressed against his legs. Glass was everywhere. The smell of fuel burned his nose. He tried to move but could not. He tried to scream, but his voice would not work. And then he heard it. Breathing, desperate, gasping breathing coming from somewhere nearby. Daniel had whispered, "Daniel, is that you?" The breathing continued. It was a terrible sound, wet and ragged like someone trying to breathe through water. Turned his head and saw his best friend pinned under a piece of the helicopter. Daniel's eyes were open, staring at nothing. Blood ran down his face. "Hold on," said. "Help is coming, just hold on." But Daniel did not hold on. For 47 minutes lay trapped in that wreckage, listening to his best friend die. He heard every painful breath. He heard the gasping become weaker and weaker. He called Daniel's name over and over. He begged him to stay awake. He promised that everything would be okay. And then the breathing stopped. The silence that followed was the worst sound he'd ever heard. Rescue workers pulled from the wreckage 3 hours later. He had a broken leg, several broken ribs, and cuts all over his body. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. But did not feel lucky, he felt cursed. Because even after his body healed, the sound did not go away. Every time closed his eyes, he heard Daniel's breathing. That horrible, gasping, dying rhythm played in his head like a song stuck on repeat. During the day, he could push it away by staying busy. He filled his hours with meetings and phone calls and paperwork. He worked until his eyes burned and his head ached. But at night, when the world went quiet, the breathing came back. Stopped sleeping, not by choice, but because sleep had become impossible. Every time he started to drift off, the gasping would fill his ears and he would jerk awake, sweating and shaking. He tried sleeping pills, but they only made the nightmares worse. He would dream of Daniel, trapped and dying, and wake up screaming. After 2 months of this, hired a sleep specialist. The doctor ran tests and gave him new medications. None of them worked. After 4 months, flew to Europe to see a famous expert in sleep disorders. The expert tried experimental treatments. None of them worked either. After 6 months, his regular doctor sat him down for a serious conversation. Your body cannot survive without sleep, the doctor said. You are averaging 2 hours a night. Your heart is under enormous stress. Your immune system is failing. If this continues, you will have a heart attack or a stroke within a year. Had stared at the doctor with empty eyes. So what do I do? You need to find a way to quiet your mind, the doctor said. Whatever is keeping you awake, you need to make peace with it, or it will kill you. Make peace with it, as if that was easy, as if could simply choose to forget the sound of his best friend dying in his arms. The months continued to pass, grew thinner and weaker. His board of directors began to worry. They held secret meetings about what would happen if the CEO collapsed. His family called constantly, begging him to take a break, to go somewhere peaceful to get better. But could not get better. He had tried everything. Every treatment, every therapy, every medication. Nothing could silence the breathing in his head. He started spending more time at his mansion instead of his office. Not because he wanted to, but because his body was giving up. Some days he was too exhausted to even get out of bed. He would lie there for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the phantom sound of Daniel dying. His staff noticed the change. The servants whispered about how the CEO looked like a skeleton. The security guards saw him wandering the hallways at odd hours, his eyes empty, his footsteps slow. Mrs., the head housekeeper, had served the Sterling family for 20 years, and she had never seen anyone look so broken. That man is dying, she told the other servants one evening, and not from any sickness a doctor can fix. She was right, was dying from something that lived inside his mind, something that no medicine could reach. On the night that changed everything, could not stay in his bedroom anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in. The silence was so loud it hurt. Daniel's breathing echoed in his skull and wanted to tear his own head apart just to make it stop. He got out of bed and walked. He did not know where he was going. He simply walked through the empty hallways of his mansion, past dark rooms and sleeping servants until he found himself outside. The night air was cool on his face. The stars were bright above him. He walked through the gardens, his bare feet wet from the grass, his mind a storm of exhaustion and despair. And then he heard something. At first thought he was imagining it. His mind had been playing tricks on him for months. He heard Daniel everywhere, in the sound of the wind, in the rhythm of his own heartbeat, in the silence between seconds. But this was different. This was music. A melody floating through the darkness, soft and gentle, like moonlight turned into sound. It was coming from somewhere ahead, from the old garden shed that had not been used in years. Walked toward the sound. Each step felt heavy. His heart was pounding. Part of him was afraid that the music was just another hallucination, another cruel trick his broken mind was playing on him. But as he got closer, the melody grew clearer, more real. It was the most beautiful thing had ever heard. The tune was simple but haunting. It rose and fell like waves on a peaceful sea. It was sad but also hopeful, like tears that come at the end of a long cry, when the worst is over and healing can begin. Reached the shed and pressed his ear against the wooden door. The music washed over him, and something happened that had not happened in 8 months. The breathing stopped. Daniel's gasping, the terrible sound that had tortured every minute of every day for 8 months, suddenly went silent. It was like someone had turned off a radio that had been playing static. The noise just disappeared. For the first time since the crash, his mind was quiet. He did not dare move. He barely dared to breathe. He simply stood there, his ear against the door, his eyes closed, and let the melody fill the empty space where the horror had been. Time passed, did not know how long, maybe minutes, maybe an hour. He was lost in the music, lost in the silence, lost in a peace he had thought he would never feel again. Then the melody stopped. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the terrible silence of death. It was the soft silence of rest, of safety, of finally being able to let go. Sank to the ground, his back pressed against the shed door. Tears ran down his face, but he did not wipe them away. He did not open the door. He did not try to see who was playing. He was too afraid that if he moved, the piece would shatter like glass. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy, his breathing slowed, and for the first time in 8 months, Sterling fell asleep. He woke up on a garden bench the next morning, covered in dew, his body stiff from sleeping outside. A servant found him and panicked, thinking he had collapsed, but waved the servant away. Because he had slept, really slept, 6 hours without nightmares, 6 hours without Daniel's breathing, 6 hours of true, deep rest. He looked at the old garden shed in the morning light. Who had been playing that music? One of the servants, a neighbor, some kind of angel. He needed to know, because whoever had made that melody had given him something priceless. They had given him hope that maybe, just maybe, he could survive. Could not stop thinking about the music. For 3 days after that magical night, he replayed the melody in his mind. He hummed it while eating breakfast. He tapped the rhythm on his desk during meetings. He lay in bed at night, trying to remember every note, every rise and fall of that haunting tune. But memory was not enough. The breathing had come back. Daniel's dying gasps had returned to torment him, filling his head with horror and grief. The one night of peace was fading like a dream and was desperate to find it again. He needed to know who had played that music. He needed them to play it again. On the 4th day, called Mrs. to his study. The head housekeeper entered the room with her usual calm manner, but her eyes showed concern when she saw how tired the CEO looked. Mrs. said, "I need to ask you something. Do any of the servants play a musical instrument?" The housekeeper thought for a moment. "I believe Maria plays the guitar a little, sir, and young Thomas mentioned once that he used to play drums in school." "What about a flute?" asked, "or some kind of wind instrument, something that makes a soft, gentle sound?" Mrs. shook her head slowly. "I am not aware of anyone who plays such an instrument, sir. May I ask why?" Leaned back in his chair. He did not want to explain. He did not want to admit that he had been wandering the gardens at 2 in the morning like a madman, but he was too tired to lie. "A few nights ago, I heard someone playing music in the garden," he said, "near the old shed. It was late at night. The music was unlike anything I have heard before. I need to find the person who was playing." Mrs. eyes widened slightly. She had worked for wealthy families her whole life, and she had learned not to ask too many questions. But she could see that this mattered too. She could see the desperation in his hollow eyes. "I will ask the staff, sir," she said. "Quietly, I will let you know what I find." "Thank you," said. "And Mrs., please do not tell anyone why I am asking. I do not want to scare the person away." The housekeeper nodded and left the room, turned to look out the window at the gardens below. Somewhere out there, someone had the power to quiet the storm in his mind. He just needed to find them. Mrs. asked her questions carefully over the next few days. She spoke to every maid, every gardener, every cook. She asked about hobbies and talents. She asked if anyone had been in the gardens late at night. Everyone said no. No one knew anything about music in the garden. Received the report and felt his heart sink. Maybe he had imagined it after all. Maybe his broken mind had created the melody out of nothing. Maybe hope was just another form of torture. But he refused to give up. Every night for the next 2 weeks went to the garden. He walked past the flowers and fountains. He stood near the old shed, waiting and listening. Sometimes he stayed for hours, his body shivering in the cool night air, his ears straining for any sound. The mysterious musician did not appear. Had noticed the change immediately. On the night after she had played her flute, she had looked out her window and seen a figure walking through the gardens. At first, she had been terrified. Had someone heard her? Was she going to be fired? She watched the figure move through the darkness and realized with shock that it was Sterling himself. The CEO was wandering his own gardens in the middle of the night, stopping near the shed where she had played. His heart pounded. She made a decision right then. It was too dangerous to play her flute anymore. If the CEO was prowling the gardens at night, she would surely be caught. And if she was caught, she would have to explain. She would have to talk about her mother, about the fire, about all the things she kept locked inside. She could not do that. She would rather die than open those wounds in front of a stranger. So stopped going to the shed. She stopped playing safe harbor. The nightmares got worse, but she forced herself to survive. She bit her pillow to keep from screaming. She dug her nails into her palms to stay grounded. She did whatever she had to do to get through the nights without the music. It was hard, so hard. The memories crashed over her like waves, and without the flute she had nothing to hold on to. But she kept going. She had survived worse. She could survive this. Meanwhile was falling apart. The brief taste of peace had made everything worse. Before that night in the garden, had accepted his suffering. He had believed that the horror in his head was permanent, that he would never escape Daniel's dying breaths. But now he knew that escape was possible. He knew that silence existed somewhere in the world. And he could not find it again. His health declined rapidly. He stopped eating regular meals. He stopped attending meetings. He spent most of his time in his study, staring at nothing, listening to the phantom breathing that never stopped. His doctor came to the mansion 3 times in 1 week, warning that was on the edge of collapse. "You need to sleep," the doctor said firmly. "Your body cannot take much more of this. If you do not rest soon, your heart will fail." Knew the doctor was right. He could feel his own body giving up. His heartbeat was irregular. His hands shook constantly. Sometimes his vision went blurry and he had to grab a chair to keep from falling. He was dying, really dying, and the only thing that could save him was a melody that had vanished into the night. On the 15th night, made one last trip to the garden. He walked slowly, his legs weak, his breath short. The moon was hidden behind clouds. The world was dark and quiet. He reached the old shed and leaned against the door. He was too tired to stand for long. His body slid down until he was sitting on the ground, his back against the wood, his head hanging low. "Please," he whispered to no one, "please come back." He did not know who he was talking to. God, maybe, or fate, or the ghost of Daniel who he sometimes imagined was watching over him. "I cannot do this anymore," continued, his voice breaking. "I am so tired. I just want it to stop. I just want to sleep." Tears ran down his face. He did not wipe them away. There was no point in pretending to be strong when he was completely alone in the darkness. Far away in the servants' quarters was also awake. The nightmares had been brutal tonight. She had dreamed of her mother burning, screaming, reaching for her with hands made of fire. She had woken up gasping, her sheets soaked with sweat, her heart racing. She lay in bed, fighting the urge to go to the shed. Her fingers twitched, longing to hold the flute. Her chest ached for the release that only music could bring. "No," she told herself, "it is too dangerous. The CEO is out there, you will be caught." But the pain was too much. The memories were too loud. She felt like she was drowning, and the flute was the only thing that could pull her to the surface. Almost without deciding, got out of bed. She put on her simple dress and grabbed the wooden flute from under her mattress. She moved through the servants' quarters like a ghost, silent and invisible. The gardens were dark and still, walked quickly, her heart pounding. She would play just one song, just one. Then she would leave and never come back. She was so focused on her own pain that she did not see the figure sitting against the shed door until she was almost on top of him. Froze, her blood turned to ice. Looked up, his eyes, hollow and red from crying, met hers. For a long moment, neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. Then saw what she was holding in her hands. The flute, a small, simple wooden flute. "It was you," he whispered. "That night, the music, it was you." Wanted to run. Every part of her body screamed to flee, to disappear, to pretend this had never happened. But her legs would not move. She stood frozen like a deer caught in the lights of an oncoming car. "Please," said, and his voice broke. "Please do not go. I need to hear it again. The melody you played that night, I need it." Stared at him, she had expected anger. She had expected questions. She had expected to be fired. She had not expected this broken man, sitting in the dirt, begging her for music. "I will give you anything," continued. "Money, a new job, a house of your own, anything, just please play that song again. I have not slept in 8 months. Every time I close my eyes I hear something terrible. But when you played that night it stopped. Everything stopped. I felt peace for the first time since." He could not finish the sentence. His voice failed, his head dropped. Looked at this man. This powerful billionaire who could buy anything in the world but could not buy a moment of rest. This broken soul who had lost someone he loved and could not escape the memory. She recognized him, not his face or his name, but his pain. She recognized it because it lived inside her too. Slowly raised the flute to her lips. Her hands were shaking, her heart was pounding, but she started to play. The melody of Safe Harbor floated through the night air, soft and gentle, sad and hopeful. The notes drifted over the garden like moonlight, touching everything with silver. Felt the effect immediately. The breathing in his head, Daniel's eternal dying gasps, faded into silence. His muscles relaxed. His racing heart slowed. The pain that had lived in his chest for 8 months loosened its grip. He closed his eyes and let the music carry him away. Played the entire song, watching the CEO's face transform from agony to peace. She saw the tears dry on his cheeks. She saw his breathing become slow and steady. She saw a man who had been drowning finally reach the shore. When the last note faded, opened his eyes. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not gratitude exactly, something deeper, something like recognition. "Thank you," he whispered, "thank you." Did not know what to say. She lowered the flute and stood there, unsure of what happened now. Pulled himself to his feet. It took effort. His body was weak and exhausted, but he stood before her, his eyes never leaving her face. "What is your name?" he asked. She said quietly, it was the most she had spoken in months, "I am a maid here." Repeated as if testing the word. "That song you play, what is it called?" Hesitated. The answer felt too personal, too sacred to share, but something in his eyes made her trust him. "Safe Harbor," she said. "My mother wrote it. She taught it to me when I was little." "Safe Harbor," said softly. "Yes, that is exactly what it feels like." He took a deep breath, the first easy breath he had taken in months. He said, "I know this is strange. I know you do not know me, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Nodded, her fingers tight around her mother's flute. "Will you play that song again tomorrow night?" asked. "And the night after that, I will pay you whatever you want. I will give you anything in my power to give, but please, please do not stop playing." Looked at this man who had everything the world could offer but needed something only she could provide. She thought of her mother, who had died saving the flute that now hung in her trembling hands. She thought of Safe Harbor, the melody that had kept her alive through the darkest years of her life. Maybe, she thought, my mother saved this music for a reason. Maybe the reason was not just me. "I do not want your money," said quietly, "but I will play." Let out a breath he had been holding. Why would you do this for a stranger? Looked at the shed behind him, then up at the stars. "Because I know what it feels like," she said, "to hear something terrible every time you close your eyes. I know what it is like to need music to survive." Stared at her. In that moment he understood that this shy, quiet maid carried her own wounds, her own nightmares, her own reasons for playing the flute at 2 in the morning. They were two broken people standing in a dark garden, two strangers connected by pain and music and the desperate need to find peace. "Tomorrow night," said, "I will come here at midnight." Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness like the ghost everyone believed her to be. Watched her go. For the first time in 8 months, he felt something besides despair. He felt hope. True to her word, came to the garden shed at midnight the next night. She found already waiting for her. He had brought a blanket and 2 chairs from the house. He looked a little better than he had the night before. His eyes were still hollow, but there was something alive in them now, something that had not been there in a long time. "You came," he said, and his voice held both relief and disbelief. "I said I would," replied quietly. She sat in one of the chairs and raised the flute to her lips, sat in the other chair, closed his eyes and listened. Played Safe Harbor from beginning to end. Then she played it again, and again. She played until her lips grew tired and her fingers ached. She played until she saw his head drop forward, his breathing slow and deep. He was asleep. Lowered the flute and watched him for a moment. In sleep, the CEO looked younger, softer. The lines of pain on his face had smoothed out. His hands, which had been clenched into fists, now rested open in his lap. She thought about waking him and telling him to go inside, but something stopped her. He looked so peaceful, so tired, so desperately in need of rest. Instead, she took the blanket he had brought and draped it over his shoulders. Then she quietly walked back to the servants' quarters, her mother's flute warm in her hands. The next morning, Mrs. found asleep in the garden. She was alarmed at first, but waved away her concerns. "I slept," he told her, and there was wonder in his voice. "I actually slept." The housekeeper did not understand what had changed, but she was too grateful to ask questions. She helped back to the house and ordered the cook to prepare a proper breakfast. For the first time in months, ate every bite. That night came again, and the night after that, and the night after that. A strange routine developed between them. Would arrive at midnight. She would play her flute, would listen, and eventually he would fall asleep. Sometimes left as soon as he was resting. Other times she stayed and played a little longer, filling the garden with melodies her mother had taught her. They did not talk much at first, was too shy, was too exhausted, the music was enough. But slowly as the nights passed, words began to come. It started on the 5th night. Was listening to play when suddenly his body jerked and his eyes flew open. His face was white. His hands gripped the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles turned pale. "Are you okay?" asked, lowering the flute. Took a shaky breath. "I am sorry, I thought I heard. I heard something else for a moment." Waited. She did not push. She had learned long ago that some wounds could only be shared when the person was ready. "There was an accident," said finally. 8 months ago, a helicopter crash. My best friend was with me. His name was Daniel." He stopped. His throat was tight. Could see the pain moving across his face like clouds crossing the sun. "We were trapped in the wreckage," continued. "I could not move. I could not help him. All I could do was listen. I listened to him die. For 47 minutes I listened to him struggle for breath. And when he finally stopped breathing, that silence was the worst sound I have ever heard." Tears were running down his face now. He did not try to hide them. "Since then I hear it all the time," he said. "His breathing, his dying, it plays in my head like a song that never ends. I cannot sleep. I cannot rest. I cannot escape it." He looked at with red, wet eyes. "But when you play that melody, it stops. Everything stops. It is the only peace I have found since the crash." Felt her heart breaking for this man. She understood his pain in a way that most people could not. She knew what it was like to carry a terrible sound inside your head. She knew what it was like to believe you would never escape. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I am so sorry about your friend." Wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Thank you. I have not talked about it, not really. The doctors ask questions and I give them answers, but I have never just told someone what it was like." "Sometimes it helps to say the words out loud," said, "even when the words are terrible." Looked at her. "You speak like someone who knows." Was quiet for a long moment. The night air was cool around them. Crickets sang in the grass. The moon was a silver coin in the sky. "I know," she said finally. "I lost my mother 7 years ago in a fire." It was the first time she had told anyone the story since leaving the hospital. The words felt strange in her mouth, like a language she had forgotten how to speak. "I was 17, she continued. "I was in my room playing this flute. My mother was in the kitchen. The fire started there. I do not know exactly what happened. Electrical problem, they said. By the time I smelled smoke, the whole apartment was burning." Was watching her with complete attention. His own pain had faded into the background. All his focus was on. "My mother got me out," said. "She pushed me through a window onto the fire escape. She told me to run. She said she was right behind me." Her voice cracked. She had to stop and breathe before she could continue. "But she was not behind me. She had gone back. The firefighters found her body the next morning. She was in the hallway. She was carrying a box." Held up the wooden flute. "This was in the box," she said. "She went back into the fire to save this flute. She died because of it, because of me." Now was crying too. The tears came without warning, spilling down her cheeks. She had kept this pain locked inside for so long. Letting it out felt like breaking open a wound that had never properly healed. "It was not your fault," said gently. "I know," whispered. "At least I know that in my head, but in my heart. In my heart I feel like I killed her. If I had not loved this flute so much, if I had not played it every day, she would not have gone back for it. She would be alive." Reached out and took her hand. It was the first time they had touched. His hand was warm and steady around her trembling fingers. "Your mother made a choice," he said. "She chose to save something that mattered to you. She did it because she loved you. That is not your fault. That is her gift." Looked at him through her tears. "That is what the doctors used to say, but it did not feel like a gift. It felt like a curse." "And now?" asked. Thought about it. She thought about all the nights she had played safe harbor alone in the darkness. All the times the melody had pulled her back from the edge of despair. All the times her mother's music had saved her life, even years after her mother was gone. "Now I do not know," she said honestly. "Sometimes it still feels like a curse, but sometimes when I play, I feel like my mother is still with me. Like she is standing right behind me, her hands on my shoulders, telling me everything will be okay." Squeezed her hand. "Maybe she is." They sat together in the garden, two broken people holding hands in the moonlight. They did not speak for a long time. They did not need to. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of understanding, of shared pain, of the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. From that night on, their midnight meetings changed. They still began with music, would play her mother's melodies and would listen until his demons were quiet, but afterward they would talk. They talked about everything, told about building his company with Daniel. He told her about the dreams they had shared, the obstacles they had overcome, the success they had achieved together. He told her about the emptiness that success had left behind when there was no one to share it with. Told about her mother. She told him about growing up poor but happy, about learning to cook and clean and play the flute. She told him about the years in the hospital after the fire when she had forgotten how to speak, how to eat, how to want to live. She told him about slowly rebuilding herself, one small step at a time. They discovered that despite their different lives, they understood each other in ways that other people could not. They had both lost someone they loved. They had both survived when they wished they had died. They had both learned to carry pain that never went away. As the weeks passed, grew stronger. He started sleeping every night, truly sleeping without nightmares. He gained weight. The color returned to his face. His doctor was amazed at the improvement and asked what had changed. "I found the right medicine," said. He did not explain further. Changed too, though more slowly. She started speaking more to the other servants. She ate meals with them instead of alone in her room. She smiled sometimes, small smiles that surprised everyone, including herself. Mrs. noticed that seemed lighter, less like a ghost, more like a person. She did not know why, and she did not ask. She was just grateful to see the young woman coming back to life. But change brings attention, and attention brings questions. One of the younger maids, a girl named, noticed that disappeared every night around midnight. She thought it was strange. She started watching. She started wondering. One night followed through the garden. She hid behind a hedge and watched as sat down with the CEO of the company. She watched as played a flute. She watched as Sterling, billionaire, fell asleep while a cleaning woman made music for him. Did not understand what she was seeing, but she knew it was unusual. She knew it was the kind of secret that other people would pay to know. She did not tell anyone right away. She wanted to think about it. She wanted to figure out how to use this information. Meanwhile, in the garden, and had no idea they were being watched. They sat together under the stars, talking about small things and big things, sharing stories and silences. Had started to realize something that scared him, something that he did not want to admit, even to himself. He was not just grateful for the music. He was not just thankful that she had saved his life. His feelings had grown beyond gratitude, beyond friendship. He was falling in love with her, and he had no idea what to do about it. Was a maid in his house. She was younger than him, from a completely different world. If anyone found out about their midnight meetings, there would be scandal. The newspapers would destroy her reputation. His board of directors would demand explanations. But when looked at in the moonlight, when he heard her play Safe Harbor, when he saw her smile at something he said, none of that seemed to matter. She had given him his life back. She had shown him that survival was possible. She had seen his darkest pain and had not looked away. How could he not love someone like that? But kept his feelings hidden. He was afraid of scaring away. He was afraid that if he said anything, she would stop coming to the garden, and he needed the music. He needed her presence. He needed these midnight hours more than he needed anything else in the world. So he said nothing, and the secret stayed between them, growing larger every day, waiting to be discovered by a world that would not understand. 6 weeks had passed since first played for in the garden. 6 weeks of midnight meetings, quiet conversations, and music under the stars. 6 weeks that had changed both of their lives in ways neither of them had expected. Was a different man now. He slept every night, usually for 7 or 8 hours. He ate regular meals. He had returned to work at Sterling Industries, attending meetings and making decisions with a clear mind. His doctor had called it a miracle. His board of directors had stopped their secret meetings about replacing him. But the biggest change was not in his body, it was in his heart. Found himself thinking about all day long. During important meetings, his mind would wander to the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. While reviewing financial reports, he would remember something funny she had said the night before. When signing contracts worth millions of dollars, he would catch himself counting the hours until midnight. He had never felt this way about anyone before. Not even the women his family had tried to arrange for him to marry. Not the socialites who flirted with him at parties. Not the business partners who offered him everything they had. Was different. She did not want his money. She did not care about his power. When she looked at him, she saw the broken man behind the billionaire face. She saw the real, the one he had hidden from the world for so long. And she accepted him, all of him, the pain and the fear and the guilt. She accepted it all because she carried the same weight inside herself. One night 2 months after their first meeting, made a decision. He could not keep his feelings hidden anymore. He had to tell the truth, even if it scared her away. They were sitting in their usual spot near the garden shed, had finished playing Safe Harbor, and the night was quiet around them. The moon was full, casting silver light on the flowers and trees. said, "I need to tell you something." Looked at him, her brown eyes were calm and patient. "What is it?" Took a deep breath. His heart was pounding. He had faced hostile business negotiations, angry shareholders, and near-death experiences. None of them had scared him as much as this moment. "These past 2 months have been the best of my life," he said slowly. "Not because I can sleep now, not because my health has improved. It is because of you." His eyes widened slightly, but she did not speak. "I know this is strange," continued. "I know you are a maid in my house and I am your employer. I know the world would not understand, but I cannot keep pretending that this is just about music. It is not. It has not been for a long time." He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were trembling. "I have feelings for you, real feelings. I think about you every moment of every day. When I am with you, I feel more alive than I have ever felt. And when we are apart, I count the minutes until I can see you again." Stared at him, her face was impossible to read. His heart sank. He had made a mistake. He had ruined everything. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "I should not have said anything. I do not want to make you uncomfortable. If you want to stop coming to the garden, I will understand. I will." "Stop," said softly. Stopped. Was quiet for a long moment. She looked down at their joined hands, at his fingers wrapped around hers. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I have never been loved before," she said. "Not by a man, not like this. After my mother died, I closed myself off. I did not let anyone get close. I thought that if I never loved anyone, I could never lose anyone. I could never be hurt again." She looked up there were tears in her eyes. "But you changed something in me," she continued. "I do not know how or when it happened, but somewhere between the music and the talking and the starlight, I started to feel things I thought I would never feel. I started to care about someone other than my mother's memory. I started to care about you." Felt his heart stop. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am terrified. I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to love someone or be loved by someone. My whole life has been about surviving, not living. But when I am with you, I want to try. I want to learn." Raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "We can learn together." Smiled. It was a small smile, shy and uncertain, but it was the most beautiful thing had ever seen. "Together," she agreed. From that night forward, their relationship became something more than friendship. They did not rush into anything. They were both too wounded for that, but they held hands more often. They sat closer together. Sometimes, after finished playing, would put his arm around her and they would watch the stars in comfortable silence. Wanted to give the world. He offered her better rooms in the mansion. He offered her new clothes, new shoes, anything she wanted, but refused almost everything. "I do not need things," she told him. "I just need this, these moments, the music, you." But there was one gift she could not refuse. One night handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a beautiful silver chain with a pendant shaped like a harbor with tiny ships. "Safe harbor," he said, "to remind you of your mother, to remind you of us." His eyes filled with tears. She let fasten the chain around her neck. The pendant rested against her heart, cool and perfect. "I will never take it off," she promised. The weeks turned into months. Winter came to the Sterling estate, bringing cold winds and early darkness, but still met in the garden every night. They bundled up in blankets and coats, their breath making clouds in the icy air. Nothing could keep them apart. Mrs. had started to notice things. The CEO's improved health, the maid who glowed with quiet happiness, the way they both seemed to disappear at the same time every night. She was not stupid. She could put the pieces together. But Mrs. said nothing. She had served wealthy families her whole life, and she had learned to keep secrets. If Mr. Sterling and the quiet maid had found comfort in each other, it was not her place to interfere. Unfortunately, not everyone was so wise. The young maid who had seen and together months ago had been watching and waiting. She had told no one, saving the information like money in a bank. She was not sure what to do with it yet. Then one day, a journalist came to the service entrance asking for gossip about Sterling. The tabloids were curious about the CEO's sudden recovery. How had a dying man become healthy so quickly? What was his secret? Saw an opportunity. She did not tell the journalist everything. She just hinted that the CEO spent his nights in the garden with a female servant. She took $200 and gave them a time and place to wait with their cameras. She did not think about what would happen too. She did not think about the lives she was about to destroy. She only thought about the money and the excitement of being part of a scandal. The journalist came the next night with a photographer. They hid in the bushes near the garden shed. They waited in the cold with their cameras ready. At midnight, walked through the garden to meet. She was carrying her flute as always. She was wearing the silver necklace he had given her. She was smiling, looking forward to another night with the man she had grown to love. Was already there, sitting in his usual chair. He stood when he saw her coming and opened his arms, walked into his embrace, and he held her close. The camera flashed. Neither of them saw it. Neither of them heard the soft click of the shutter. They were too wrapped up in each other, too lost in their private world. The photographer took dozens of pictures, playing the flute, watching her with love in his eyes. The two of them holding hands, sitting close together, sharing whispers in the moonlight. Then the journalist and photographer slipped away into the darkness, carrying images that would soon be seen by millions. The next morning woke up to his phone ringing. It was his assistant, sounding panicked. "Sir, you need to see this right now." An hour later, the headline was everywhere. On websites, on television, on the front page of every tabloid in the country. Sterling CEO's secret maid mistress. Shocking photos of billionaires, late-night romance with household servant. The pictures were grainy but clear enough, and in the garden, holding, playing her flute while watched with visible emotion. The story painted it as something dirty, something shameful, a rich man taking advantage of a poor woman. The tabloids dug into his past. They found records of her hospital stay. They wrote about her mental problems and her troubled history. Read the articles with growing fury. They had taken something beautiful and made it ugly. They had taken a love story and turned it into a scandal. His phone would not stop ringing. His board of directors demanded meetings. His lawyers warned him about bad publicity. His family called to express their horror. "You must get rid of this woman immediately," his mother said. "Fire her, send her away, tell the press it was all a misunderstanding." "She is not someone to get rid of," said coldly. "She saved my life." "She is a maid," his mother replied. "A nobody. Think of your reputation, think of the company." Hung up the phone without answering. But the pressure did not stop. It got worse. Every hour brought new attacks. Reporters camped outside the mansion gates. Business partners called to express their concern. Stock prices at Sterling Industries dropped 5%. Saw the news too. She saw the pictures. She read the horrible words written about her. She saw the comments calling her a gold digger, a seductress, a scheming servant who had trapped a rich man. She had survived a fire. She had survived losing her mother. She had survived years of darkness and pain. But she was not sure she could survive this. The world had found her. The world had seen her. And the world had decided she was worthless. That night did not go to the garden. She stayed in her small room, sitting on her bed, holding her mother's flute. The silver necklace felt heavy around her neck. She knew what she had to do. She could not let lose everything because of her. His company, his reputation, his family. He had worked his whole life for those things. She could not be the reason they were destroyed. She loved him too much to let that happen. With trembling hands, took out a piece of paper and began to write a letter. The words came slowly, each one feeling like a knife in her heart. She told that she was leaving. She told him that their time together had been the happiest of her life. She told him that she would always carry him in her heart, just like she carried her mother's memory. She told him that Safe Harbor had never belonged to her. It belonged to her mother, and now it belonged to him. When the letter was finished, folded it carefully and placed it on her pillow next to her mother's flute. Then she packed her few belongings into a small bag. She waited until the darkest hour of the night, when even the reporters at the gate had fallen asleep in their cars. And she walked away from the Sterling mansion forever. By the time the sun rose was gone. Only a letter and a wooden flute remained, lying on a pillow in an empty room, waiting to break a billionaire's heart.